Hello, and welcome to this week's Movie Math, where, the Quantumania Box Office is just enough in the middle, in the gray zone, that we're going to be arguing about it for a whole week until we see that second weekend drop. Because it's just good enough that some of you are going to claim success, that some of you already tweeted me, but yet it's soft enough that I think many of us know that it's not great. But some of you just will not admit it. So we're going to have to wait for that second weekend drop. Who knows? It could be an Avatar too. You know, it's like one movie does it. Like ever since Heath Ledger turned out to be a great Joker, people are like, you don't know. And I think, the same thing with the box office. We all thought Avatar 2 wasn't going to do it. And, we're going to talk about today how that's just so freaking successful. It's ridiculous. So now, yes, I wouldn't say that Quantumania's box office is fantastic or even strong. But I would say it's good enough. It's definitely not bad, at least so far. Again, that second weekend drop is going to be quite telling. Because while Quantumania just managed to clear $100 million for the 3-day, that's what I said it needed to do, and it squeaked by, and it's certainly a high point for Peyton Reed's trilogy. But this is a soft opening, and I'm not just talking box office numbers, because Quantumania's cinema score is tied with the Eternals for Marvel's lowest to date. But Grace, what about the Rotten Tomatoes audience score? So many of you like to point to that. The Rotten Tomatoes audience score is not accurate. It's a good reflection of how the fandom is feeling, because the fandom searches out the Rotten Tomatoes audience score. You got to go and say, I'm going to go rate the movie on Rotten Tomatoes. And that's usually because you really want to support the movie or you really want to ding it. So that's what the Rotten Tomatoes audience score does. However, Cinema Score is where they spot poll movie theaters across the country and they go up to random people as they leave the theater. So they get a really good cross-section of people and they ask people who normally wouldn't go online to rate the movie. So they get a much more effective grade. Also, Cinema Score has been proven to be indicative of how the box office is going to perform. The lower the Cinema Score, the worse the hold. So anything lower than a B+ is pretty bad. Even a B+ ain't great. Audiences are usually pretty generous, with the exception of horror. Horror usually gets graded very harshly. But for most movies, if a B+ is really the last, you're doing okay. Because that's why Marvel has some B+. For decades, they earned just A's, which is extraordinary and good for them. But both Multiverse of Madness and Thor Love and Thunder got B+, which are just a little bit above Quantumania's and Eternals' B's. So again, I told you audiences tend to be very forgiving, so that just shows you how bad a B score is. So I don't think B, but doesn't mean audiences hated it, but it means they think it's pretty mid. It's not great. Eternals, is like a lot of you like to point out, did very well on Disney Plus, and I suspect, as I said in my review, that Quantumania is better fitted for the streaming service as well. Other Marvel movies that have opened at around the century mark got to 600 to 700 million worldwide by the end of their runs, with Spider-Man Homecoming and Far From Home, interestingly, being the rare exceptions. The first one getting close to 900 and Far From Home, of course, crossing 1 billion. Is that because Sony's releasing them? I do wonder why they don't perform quite the same pattern. But Eternals only made it to 401 million worldwide, but that was, of course, still during the pandemic. That opened with a little bit, it still opened pretty strong. So I don't think Quantumania is going to do as low as 401, but I don't think it's going to make it to 1 billion, or I would guess even 800. Because I feel that the low audience score and a soft debut in Asian markets already, Quantumania severely underperformed in China, you're looking at, I would say, 500 to 700 million total by the end of its run, which interestingly is right where I put the upcoming Flash movie as well as a prediction. Does this speak also to the oversaturation of the comic book market? There are so many comic book movies these days, you have a combination of people being comic booked out, right? Like, peace out, man, I'm taking a break. And then also the audience maybe being divided. People being more choosy in the comic book movies they go and see, whereas before they saw them all. But now it's just too many. Hopefully Quantumania comes in at the high end, because if it can have a 7 in front of it, it will be a marked improvement on the last Ant-Man. It can still have a 6 in front of it, and the high end of the 6 doesn't be an improvement. But if it had a 7 in front of it, Marvel could say, hey, this trilogy, improved with every outing. And Marvel can already boast that they have the third biggest President's Day weekend ever, although definitely the weakest of the three modern-day comic book movies that have chosen to open this holiday weekend. Not a big opening, not a lot of movies dare to open in this space. So this is for Marvel, this is their 17th biggest opening, and outside of the pandemic, their lowest since the last Ant-Man movie. So I hope, they said they were making there was a rumor going around they were making an Ant-Man 4. I would be, let's talk about that, because I think that seems like a stupid idea. So I feel very strong that with the backlog of characters that Kevin Feige is waiting to get to, he has several dance cards at this point. If a Marvel movie can't deliver $800 million worldwide at the box office, what are we doing here? Is it really worth any of our time? No, it's not. Past Marvel movies have doubled up, even tripled up or more on heroes, and it's been quite effective. Maybe not every character needs a trilogy, and not getting a trilogy doesn't mean that character still can't be used effectively in other parts of the franchise. Mark Ruffalo's Hulk, for instance, has done a lot of assists at this point, due to a sticky contract with Universal that they cannot make a standalone Hulk film. But maybe that ended up being a happy accident. And Ant-Man and the Wasp would be better used in other characters' movies. Ant-Man, for instance, was a brilliant addition in Endgame. They used him very effectively there. Back to Quantumania's box office, interestingly, despite Michelle Pfeiffer, Evangeline Lilly, and Kathryn Newton, Quantumania's audience was 65% men. That's not good. I think sometimes, I don't like that. There's an old saying that, like men would have to drag women to these movies, but you can see how many women comic book fans there are these days. And I think, it just shows, I think, the way the Wasp is underused. Because, Multiverse of Madness, I think, had much more universal appeal because Wanda is such a great character. And it's a shame that the Wasp hasn't been used correctly. Look at this amazing picture that I snapped yesterday when I went to see the movie again. It was hard to sit through a second time, I gotta tell you. As much as I liked parts of it the first time, the second time I was like, this is rough. But I saw it again in a Dolby theater, and they have their beautiful entranceway, and I saw Wasp as soon as I went through the double doors, and I was like, she looks amazing. She looks incredible. How are they not doing more with this character? I mean, that's Marvel's Tinkerbell right there. Just as I've been saying for years, as one of you recently tweeted, Wanda is Marvel's Disney princess. And they did that correctly, and you can see how that's worked out. So a real missed opportunity with the Wasp here, man. A real missed opportunity. I think they not only don't use her enough, but they divided her up amongst multiple actresses with different generations of the Wasp. Mistake after mistake after mistake, and the character has suffered for it. Diversity demos were strong across the board, with Post-Track reporting that a large part of the audience came out to support Marvel. So that means you're kind of looking at the baseline of Marvel, right? After all the poor reviews, these are the diehard Marvel fans that showed up without tapping into the casuals market. To a point. I mean, my parents did go and see this movie yesterday. I went with them. They did not care for it. They like Jonathan Majors, but otherwise, they actually walking out of the theater, they were like, we're not seeing Guardians. They're like, we fell for it again. Because they're just not huge comic book fans. And they went back for this, and they felt that it was a mistake. Although, again, they did like Jonathan Majors quite a bit. We'll talk about him in a second. So I think that it's actually $100 million still. Some people giving Marvel the benefit of the doubt. So you're really looking at probably like a guaranteed maybe 80 to 90 million, or maybe even 70 to 90 million. Like that's the Marvel fandom. And everything else is having to, try and convince those people to come and see this next movie. Again, Quantumania's second weekend drop will be quite telling about its box office future. But also, according to Post-Track, 25% came out for Jonathan Majors as Kang. Isn't that interesting? I don't know if they asked or not, but there's no report on people coming to see poor Paul Rudd. That's great. Now, of course, Kang is a very important character. Marvel has made it clear that he's going to be showing up in a number of Marvel movies and shows for the next couple of years. An even more prominent villain than Thanos was. So that's, people were very eager to meet him. But also, Majors is a star on the rise, as I talk about all the time. So I've mentioned to you before his Sundance movie, Magazine Dreams, and somebody asked me when it would be coming out. It was picked up by Searchlight, and it's going to come out towards the end of this year for the awards season. But the trades pointed out, and I think this is a good observation, that Searchlight is now a division of Disney. So Disney scooped up this movie to help build their star. Oh, look at that. That's another reason the Fox acquisition has surprising dividends besides the obvious ones. So they're like, wow, wouldn't it be great if our big villain was an Oscar-nominated actor? Yoink, let's make it happen. Searchlight, of course, is a very good shingle distributor. They're like aces when it comes to award season. And if anyone can get Jonathan Majors an Oscar nomination and maybe even a win for Magazine Dreams, it is Searchlight. There's so much buzz on the film at this point, and I think on Majors himself, I think the industry will decide at the end of this year, or at the beginning of next year, that it is time for him to get his first Oscar nomination. And it should be for that movie. But Majors also has Creed 3 in just 2 weeks, opposite Killmonger, and that is taking over all the premium screens from Quantumania. Avatar had the premium screens for months. Quantumania is getting them for just 2 weeks. But that isn't necessarily a death knell for Quantumania, because Avatar 2 lost all its premium screens this week to Quantumania, and Avatar 2 still managed to come in second place with just a 15% drop in its 10th weekend. On the all-time charts, Avatar 2 is now at number 9 domestic, right behind Jimmy's Titanic, and on the worldwide chart, he just surpassed himself. He just surpassed Titanic for third place, giving Jimmy Cameron 1, 3, and 4 on the all-time chart, and Zoe Saldana starring in 1 through 3. That's incredible. That's incredible. That's really great for Zoe Saldana. Her agent and manager should really be playing that up more. As for the rest of the box office, despite Quantumania entering the fray, holds were very strong across the board. Usually when a big blockbuster breaks into the marketplace, it takes up all the air in the room, and other movies suffer huge drops. Not this weekend, as some casuals opted to see other movies in theaters instead of Marvel's latest. Puss in Boots 2 fell less than 10%, even though it's been in theaters and on streaming for weeks now. Liam Neeson, though, might have made the same movie a few too many times at this point, with Marlowe barely able to open in the top 10, while Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey proves just shock value is not enough to sell a movie. Before I move over to streaming, I do want to touch back on Marvel for a moment, because I know that the comment section is probably going nuts, because I saw this happening in my videos that I made over Quantumania, with many of you insisting that the movie wasn't that bad. Is that really a good defense of a movie? It's not that bad, guys. I think that you can see that the conversation is smaller for this movie, with casuals and Marvel fans who don't like Quantumania simply leaving the chat, which could be very bad for Marvel for the long term, if that sticks. Of course, we don't want to see the fandom tear Marvel apart, like what happened with Star Wars and its fans, but we don't want fans to create a false sense of security either. Is the Rotten Tomatoes score, audience cinema score, and soft box office enough to get Marvel to course correct, or do we have to hit rock bottom for that to happen? I think Bob Iger's recent conversation with the earnings call for stockholders about quality over quantity means that he at least knows that there's a problem. And just like he forced Star Wars to hit pause, a pause they're having a very hard time coming out of, by the way, and maybe that's why Iger isn't having Feige hit pause, but instead is saying, slow your roll. And Feige has slowed down significantly, announcing delays just this past week for many Marvel movies and streaming. But with the Marvels delayed so it can go through yet another round of reshoots. I don't even want to tell you how many rounds of reshoots it's had, because it's just going to ding the movie. And I think Brie Larson gets enough hate, but it's more than one round. What's it going to take for Marvel to realize that it's the scripts? It's the scripts. It's obviously the scripts. We don't have to sit around here and be like, I wonder what the problem is. It's your scripts. And on that note, hopefully James Gunn is true to his promise that DC movies will not go into production until the script is locked. But then, who's deciding if the script is good enough to be locked? This is very difficult. It's long been said that directors are in charge when it comes to movies, and screenwriters are in charge with streaming shows. And you can see the difference in quality, although not with Marvel, interestingly enough. Stop hiring from Rick and Morty! It's like, not only screenwriters, but a specific type of screenwriter, for Pete's sake. For a while now, Hollywood has felt that respect for screenwriters has been slipping away. And I think it's safe to say that we might be at the low point right now. It's hard to imagine it getting any lower, but let's see. Keep hiring Rick and Morty writers, and we'll find out. A number of you said that Quantumania was so much like a Rick and Morty script, and perhaps because Rick and Morty deals with the multiverse and time travel and alternate dimensions, maybe that's why Kevin Feige tapped into that writer's room. But it's clearly not working for movies versus shorter form content. And also, maybe because it's a different audience, it's a broader audience. Many of you, I saw, for those of you who did not care for Quantumania, many of you were proclaiming that opening up the multiverse really is a Pandora's box for Kevin Feige and is what's destroying the MCU right now, or at least severely injuring it. We'll see. This is very interesting. I did do a Kang breakdown on Friday, and I was like, this is complicated. Perhaps too complicated for normies, aka muggles. So let's go over to streaming. Let's discuss two brilliantly written shows, The Last of Us and House of the Dragon. Really, both shows are incredibly well written. You got to give it up for HBO at least. They know how to hire writers. Doesn't even apply to all of Warner Brothers, just HBO. The Last of Us is doing pretty darn good on Nielsen's charts, even as an acquired show. Again, only its HBO Max audiences counted, not those that watch it on HBO, and not those that pirate it either. I'll be curious if this time House of the Dragon is given a run for its money on pirating with The Last of Us. But anyway, so both shows are hobbled in competing on Nielsen, but still both managed to do pretty well. In fact, they do exactly the same. Both The Last of Us and House of the Dragon debuted at number 6 on the overall charts on Nielsen, although The Last of Us has a few more minutes. Some headlines tried to make it seem like The Last of Us was an even bigger hit than House of the Dragon, but that's not totally true. I'd say they're on par, which is incredible, but they're on par because don't forget The Last of Us had a movie-length first episode, so on something that measures in viewing minutes like Nielsen does, The Last of Us is going to come out on top just because it's got more minutes. And both debuted at number 3 on the acquired chart. Now, House of the Dragon was building on 8 seasons on Game of Thrones. So The Last of Us debuting on par, coming out of just the video game space. But what I mean by that is that it was only in that audience space. It had not moved over to like the TV audience. So it's hard to transition from one audience to another. And so that's very impressive. And perhaps it was hiring some of the Game of Thrones actors, right, for the leads. And then also, of course, bringing over Craig Mazin from Chernobyl. So the show did have other pedigree that it was able to lean onto. The Walking Dead on Netflix, another zombie show, is higher, but that's due to having several seasons because, Nielsen goes by total number of episodes overall, not by season. And The Last of Us has just 2 episodes that it's working with there. As you can see, that 90s show was renewed for a reason because it debuted in 2nd place on the overall chart and the originals chart, right beneath fellow Netflix show Ginny and Georgia, which is, and insofar as Nielsen, because Nielsen's a couple of weeks behind, still on top. Still on top. Do any of you watch Ginny and Georgia? Who's watching Ginny and Georgia? It's like that Virgin River show. You're like, where is this coming from? The movies chart continues to deliver pitiful numbers. Whew! With Rob frickin' Lowe's Doggone for Netflix able to win the week with a measly 400 million minutes score. That's so low. It's not even anywhere near being able to get on the overall chart. That's just embarrassing. No one's watching movies on streaming. On Netflix, for just last week, speaking of movies, despite their lack of chemistry on the red carpet, Ashton Kutcher and Reese Witherspoon still have plenty of chemistry with audiences, easily topping the movies chart with their Valentine's Day comedy, which also goes to show that more streaming services and perhaps movies should try to program for the holiday. The Last of Us, episode 7, should have been for a Valentine's Day weekend. What a missed opportunity. One of you pointed out that The Last of Us DLC, which is episode 7, the Ellie Riley thing, did come out for Valentine's Day. And so, what a shame. Oh well, shoulda, coulda, woulda. All right. And with shows, audiences are still in love with Joe Goldberg, as You Season 4 Part 1 not only took the top spot, but brought Seasons 1 and 3 back into the top 10. You Season 4 Part 2 debuts March 9th. I watched Season 1 of You when it debuted, and only parts of Season 2 and 3 when they debuted. I think I might have watched all of 2, but I watched very little. I didn't finish 3. But I did watch Season 4, which crosses the pond to London and becomes a very different show. I would say Dexter meets Gossip Girl. I mean, you could argue that's what You was like to begin with, but it really seems to lean into it with this new season. Thankfully, Penn Badgley is still charismatic enough to carry the whole show. I saw him doing an interview where he said he came this close to getting the Jesse Pinkman role on Breaking Bad, which seems ridiculous to me. What a different show that would have been. But apparently it was just down to him and Aaron Paul, which is crazy. Although he still works and Aaron Paul doesn't, so you never know how things are going to go. Penn Badgley has become a producer on You. Good for him. And this is from Greg Berlanti. That Greg Berlanti, he's always, popping up and surprising us. He does Flight Attendant too. He's extremely prolific. He's like the poor man's Ryan Murphy. He doesn't all the content, but none of the prestige. It probably really annoys him. So anyway, by the way, on the new season of You, that's the lady from Ghosts, the BBC version. I was like, wow, that's crazy. Good for her. She's got range. But the diminishing audience scores for You, let's see if they go out on top or kind of like in the middle, or they crash and burn with a potential season 5. Maybe they can turn things around. I guess it depends if Penn Badgley wants, a couple, some more money in the bank, right? Now, over on so again, You season 2 part 4, You season 4 part 2 comes back March 9th. What can I say? I will finish it, although who the killer was so obvious. It was ridiculous. All right. Over on iTunes, The Fabelmans is now available to rent for just $6 and shot back to number 1. I don't know if it ever was at number 1, but it's at number 1 now, and it has been in the top 10, I think, almost since its release. While the rest of the top 10 is made up of the usual suspects, recent theatrical releases, or in some cases, movies that are still in theaters. Plus a star-studded paycheck movie that seems, as always, to be just awful, right? Stars get paid, you have to suffer through it. Why does this happen? It's like a merry-go-round we can't get off. By the way, the unrated extended cut of M3GAN is actually going to be a Peacock exclusive. When you're over there, watch Poker Face. It's a great show. So that's a Peacock exclusive that will start streaming on the service on Friday. What else is coming out this week? In theaters, Elizabeth Banks has quite the clapback after Charlie's Angels with Cocaine Bear. Good for her. I'm proud of Elizabeth Banks. And Charlie's Angels was not bad. But Cocaine Bear is another wild card from Universal. They're dealing out wild cards left and right. It's going great for them. Will Cocaine Bear have enough energy to overtake Quantumania? Very unlikely. Quantumania would have to fall so much and Cocaine Bear so overperform that it would be quite interesting. But it will be, I think it could still be close though. So this will be a fun battle to watch next weekend. Bear versus Ant. One hopped up on cocaine. But anyway, Cocaine Bear could do some real damage if the reviews are good. I'm seeing it tomorrow night. I'm not quite sure when the review embargo is, but I'll find out. There are some pretty solid movies on streaming, too, as well this coming week. Kevin Hart teams up with another big star, this time John Travolta, for Die Hard the Movie on Prime Video. And Netflix has We Have a Ghost with David Harbour and Anthony Mackie, I believe, in a supporting role. So those both look, I think We Have a Ghost looks particularly good. As for streaming shows, Outer Banks returns to Netflix for season 3 on Thursday, and Bel Air returns to Peacock, something else you could watch if you're going to check out unrated M3GAN, as season 2 kicks off this week for weekly release. On Friday, Prime Video tries to do its own office thriller a la Severance with The Consultant. That trailer looked so ridiculous. Well, you can travel around the world with Eugene Levy, speaking of ridiculous, but in a good way, in Apple's The Reluctant Traveler. Apple TV also will debut new thriller Liaison, a British-French co-production starring Vincent Cassel and Eva Green. There she is. Where's she been? And except for Tim Burton ruining her career. But anyway, she's like, why did he help Helena Bonham Carter's career but ruin mine? Weird. All right, and Party Down returns after more than a decade, as several of its stars have blown up in a major way in the past few years, with season 3 on Stars. Good, wow, where the heck is Stars? It's so hard to find all these things, if you're doing Peacock, you're not going to go do Stars too. So or maybe you will. Is anyone here a Party Down fan? So that's this week's Movie Math. What have you been watching? What do you plan to watch? And what do you think about Quantumania's opening weekend and its box office future, plus Marvel's future overall? Share those thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.